rad 3 plus 4 rad 2 in the denominator. We're going to change that to 2 rad 3 minus 4 rad 2. So over here on the right side, if we have a conjugate right over here, sorry, it's going to take me a minute to figure out how to write on this iPad. It's a little bit different than the tablet. Conjugate, we're going to use when the denominator is a binomial or trinomial. Okay, and here what we have, if we have the expression of like rad A plus rad B in the denominator, the conjugate of rad A plus rad B is rad A minus rad B. Now think about it. If we multiply the expression and the conjugate together here, okay, we're setting up essentially what we have is the difference of two squares. If you remember that factoring pattern, you know, that a squared minus b squared, that binomial term factored into the product of these two binomials. Well, if I multiply these two things out, I would get rad A times rad A, which is A. I'd get rad A times rad B, which is rad AB, or negative rad AB. And then I do rad B times rad A, which is a positive rad AB. Those two terms would cancel out. Okay, so I would get the O and the I in FOIL, the middle terms to cancel out. And I'd have rad B times negative rad B, which would be minus B. So you can see those radical terms would cancel out. And similarly, if my expression was rad A minus rad B, my conjugate would be rad A plus rad B. Okay, and the same idea here, you know, we're pretty much multiplying the same thing. The order of multiplication doesn't matter. We would still wind up with A minus B, which should give us a rational term in the denominator. So back up to number 10. Okay, we're going to multiply this expression by the conjugate, which is going to be 2 rad 3 minus 4 rad 2 over itself. 2 rad 3 minus 4 rad 2. Box this off over here. In the numerator, we have to make sure we distribute the term. Listen, if the numerator is a binomial, you have to double distribute there, okay? So just be careful. So distribute that 5 through. I get 10 rad 3, okay, minus 20 rad 2. And in the denominator, okay, we get 2 rad 3 times 2 rad 3, which is 4 times 3, or 12, okay? Remember, the outer and the inner terms are going to cancel out by that difference of two squares factoring pattern. So I have 4 rad 2 times negative 4 rad 2, which is minus 16 times 2. All right, I'm going to move this right here. So I still have a 10 rad 3 minus 20 rad 2 up top. In the bottom, I wind up with 12 minus 32, which keep going here. 10 rad 3 minus 20 rad 2. That's over negative 20. The last step here is just to simplify. We reduce by a factor of, looks like negative 10. That's why we get negative rad 3 plus 2 rad 2 all over 2. And that is our simplified form. Okay, so we got rid of the radicals in the denominator. Okay, and we have an equivalent expression in the simplified form. Okay, so yeah, use a conjugate whenever that binomial term, that radical term in the denominator is a binomial. Okay, now moving down to number 11. Looks like something we had in the past. Okay, we have a complex fraction with a radical. And listen, there are a couple different ways to simplify this thing. I'm going to stick with the way that I've been doing with my classes. I'm going to make the numerator piece and the denominator piece. We're going to organize the numerator into one fraction and the denominator into one fraction. So start with the numerator. Remember, we're adding expressions here, or adding fractional terms. I need a common denominator, which is going to be rad 6. So I wind up with rad 6 over rad 6 plus 3 over rad 6, which is going to be rad 6 plus 3 all over rad 6. There's my numerator term. My denominator term is going to be same idea, common denominator is the rad 6. So I have 2 rad 6 over rad 6 minus 1 over rad 6, which is 2 rad 6 minus 1 over rad 6. Okay, and for the complex fraction, we are taking the numerator and we are dividing it by the denominator, which, if you remember, is the numerator times the reciprocal of the denominator. So I wind up with rad 6 plus 3 over rad 6 times the reciprocal of the denominator, which is rad 6 over 2 rad 6 minus 1. Okay, notice here the rad 6's here cancel out. I wind up with a rad 6 plus 3 over 2 rad 6. Sorry about that. 2 rad 6 minus 1. Okay, and notice we have a denominator that has a binomial term with a radical in it. So we're going to use a conjugate to rationalize that denominator. So the conjugate here, think about it, it's going to be 2 rad 6 plus 1 over 2 rad 6 plus 1, just changing the sign in the middle. Now, the difference here from number 10 is that we have a binomial in the numerator as well. You have to double distribute here. Okay, so be careful. Binomial times a binomial. Okay, it's a FOIL, double distribution. So I wind up with 2 times 6, that's rad 6 times rad 6 is 6. Okay, plus rad 6, that's my outer terms, plus 6 rad 6, my inner terms, plus 3, the last terms, over. Now, the denominator, we're multiplying the expression by its conjugate, so I wind up with 4 times 6. The outer and the inner terms in that FOIL will cancel out, so that's going to be minus 1 times 1, which is 1. So simplifying up here, I wind up with 2 times 6, that's 12, so I have 12 plus 3, that's 15, plus 7 rad 6, all over 24 minus 1, which is 23. And I would look to reduce by a common factor, but that 15, 7, and 23 don't share any common factors. There is your simplified form. Okay, so moving on, get to the fun one. Let me find it. It's going to be number 12. Looks like fun, doesn't it? So listen, this one, a little bit different, but we're going to use the same idea with the conjugate. We have a trinomial in the denominator here. With this, we're going to group 2 of these terms together. So in this one, I'm going to choose the rad 5 and the rad 3. I'm going to isolate them inside a parenthesis. Okay, and we're going to create a conjugate just by changing the other sign on the outside. So this one, I'm going to multiply this by the conjugate, which is going to be rad 5 plus rad 3 minus 2 rad 2. That's the sign I'm changing right there, the only sign I'm changing, over itself. Oh, sorry, that's a 2 rad 2 up top. Make that change. I know my students in my class would be screaming at me there. That's all right. Okay, so I set up my conjugate. At the top, we're multiplying by 1. We would have to distribute there or double distribute if necessary. But we get a rad 5 plus rad 3 minus 2 rad 2 up top. Now, the bottom. Think about what happens here. Okay, I'm going to have rad 5 plus rad 3 times itself. That is rad 5 plus rad 3 squared. Now, if I multiply the rad 5 plus rad 3 here times the negative 2 rad 2, then the rad 5 plus rad 3 times the positive rad 2 rad 2 rad 2. Those terms would cancel each other out by the FOIL, okay, by the FOIL in that difference of 2 squares. Okay, so that you can kind of like see that idea, from the ones we did before with the binomial. So here I'm just left over with multiplying 2 rad 2 times negative 2 rad 2, which is negative 4 times 2, which will be negative 8. But we do have to kind of keep going with this denominator here to make sure it's all a rational number. And listen, this is going to be a 2-step process, okay? We're not going to be done after this step. So just this trinomial in the denominator just kind of requires an additional step. So I'm going to move that over here. I have the rad 5 plus rad 3 minus 2 rad 2 up top. In the denominator, okay, I'm gonna multiply out that rad 5 plus rad 3 squared. That's going to be 5. Plus, I'm going to have a rad 15 plus a rad 15, which will be 2 rad 15, plus 3 minus 8. Keep going. Just kind of make, see, I'm kind of making sure I'm trying not to make any copying errors, which I just did again. But here, now that's over. I have 5 plus 3 is 8 minus 8. Look at these three terms right here. They knock each other out. 8 minus 8 is 0. So that's over 2 rad 15. Okay, so now we still have a radical in the denominator. So in this one, we still have to rationalize. So we have a monomial here. We're just going to multiply by that rad 15 over rad 15. Don't worry about the 2. We can have a rational number in the denominator. So I just got to get rid of the radical there. Got to distribute all the way through to all three terms in the numerator. That's going to be the square root of 75 plus the square root of 45 minus 2 times the square root of 30 over 2 times 15 in the denominator. We do have to simplify up top. Rad 75, that is the square root of 25 times the square root of 3. So that's 5 rad 3. Plus rad 45, that's rad 9 times rad 3, so plus 3 rad 3. Or sorry, 3 rad 5. 9 times 5. So that's going to be 3 rad 5. The square root of 30 doesn't have any perfect square factors. So that's 2 times the square root of 30. And that's all over 30. Last thing I would look for here, do I have any common factors between the 5, the 3, the negative 2, and the 30? Which we do. Okay, I can reduce... no, we don't. That is it. They don't share any common factors. So, listen, that is your final simplified form. So again, equivalent to the original, just without radicals in the denominator. So again, look at how this process worked. Just group 2 of those radicals together. I mean, you could even play, it doesn't matter which ones you group together. It could be any one of them. But set up your conjugate after you group 2 of them together. Be careful with that FOIL piece. And then do the 2-step process here. There's going to be an additional step after that where you have to rationalize again. Okay, so a little bit more work, a little bit more tedious, but still possible by using that conjugate. Okay, so listen, for the rest of this lesson, you'll see below, we have other problems. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to pause this lesson. I'm going to work out the rest of the problems. So I would take, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, try to work them out yourself, check your answers against my answers here, and make sure you're good to go. And we will have additional follow-ups on Classroom, whether it's a Google Doc or an exit slip. So hope you understand what's going on here. Check out the problems below, and we will see you soon. Thanks. Okay, guys, so hopefully you had a chance to try these last 3 problems. So here's number 13. Feel free to pause this, so you can check your work, then move to the next one. So just number 13, a little bit trickier than number 12. That bottom piece, after you set up your conjugate in that trinomial, wound up being a binomial, which you had to, again, use another conjugate, which then required a double distribution there. So if you look like right up here where I have double distribute, okay, that was kind of a pain in the butt sort of thing. Just had to kind of work your way through that. Okay, be careful with the simplifying, combining like terms and all that. Okay, but there's your final answer, all as one fraction. Moving on to number 14, there it is, straight up conjugate. Have to FOIL up in the numerator. Okay, work your way through it. Again, be careful with the multiplication, the simplifying, and all that. Reduce at the final step. There's your answer there. and number 15 right there. So all I did at the first step is I took the square root of 8 and I simplified it to 2 rad 2.